there, and welcome to the Parenting Show. I'm Jennifer Anderson, your co-host. My co-host is sitting next to me on the couch. Alyson Schaefer is here with me as always, parenting expert and
mother of two.
And mother of
I'm
two.
credentialed in other ways.
Yes, and I've decided right off the top of the show, I'm not even giving it a chance. I don't like this topic.
What's in store?
I don't like it. I'm not going to deal well with it. And I'm just going to sit here and listen to what you have to say. We're talking about parenting your grown and flown children.
You know, we have a lot of grandparents that watch this show, and we also have parents who have been true and faithful to this show for a long time, and they're like, our kids are like leaving now. And we had a weird situation during the pandemic where we had kids who normally would have maybe launched and gone.
Yes.
We're back at home because of shutdowns and bubbling and things like that. And we have a lot of kids that are staying at home because they've done all that stuff. It has nothing to do with the pandemic. It's impossible to afford housing. So a lot of them are staying at home till they can kind of get together enough of a down payment to go. So families are staying together longer, and then eventually they go, and it's really hard on some parents.
It is.
Do you know, it's actually a good sign, because what it means is that we are parenting better than we ever have before. I think we lose sight of that. Part of kids not wanting to leave and us not wanting our kids to go is because we actually enjoy each other's company.
Right.
When your parent was running around, you know, holding up the leather strap and yelling at you all the time, you were like, I can't wait to get out of this house. And, you know, now we're all sitting around and playing board games and having a good time and enjoying each other. And yeah, it's different day and age.
Yeah, and I think, you know, for my husband, he will say, because so we have twins who are in grade 12, and we have the potential of one or two or none heading off next year, depending on what they choose and what they decide. But my husband will say, you know, are you afraid to be alone with me? Like, you feel like you're having this crisis. And I say to him, I think it's because the potential is there for both of them to go in different directions.
Yeah.
And be far away at the same time. And we've gone from having two at home to none at home. And we had, you know, 4 at home at one time, and then 2 at home, and now none. But it's just, that is fearful to me.
Yeah. I have to say, even when my one daughter went away to camp or something, the other daughter who stayed at home was like, what? Why are you always looking at me? Why are you always looking at me? I'm like, we're not always looking at you. Like, but when you're used to being a foursome, a threesome, you know, it's like you're the only kid. So then when you have none, the energy level changes. Your days are very different. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to say, I don't feel like I'm a helicopter parent. I don't feel like I'm fully invested. I have my own life, you know, in addition to the lives that they have and what they do, and so my world doesn't center around theirs, which I think is a good thing.
Yes.
But I'm still having a hard time with it.
You can just imagine. So there are many people who made the considered decision and that they were going to be stay-at-home moms, and they were going to put other things on hold, and they were going to dedicate themselves to raising their kids. Mm-hmm. And so that becomes the thing that gives them meaning and purpose, the way an occupation would. They took it on to that full extent. And if you don't divest yourself, and when I mean divest, I mean you're also a sister, you're also a community member, you can also be a volunteer. It doesn't necessarily mean going back to the workplace, but the truth is, if we don't round it out with other focal points, with other ways to make contributions, other ways for us to feel that we are intersecting with other social groups, running groups, card groups, whatever it might be, that if you are just clearly living for your children, and then you do your job the way you're supposed to, and they actually do get on with their lives, there can be a real grief reaction that can happen for some parents.
Yes.
It's because grief is not just about death. I think some people think that you can only grieve when someone dies. You grieve the end of something, the loss of something. So moving to a different stage of life, it means it's the end of parenting your little children. That's a grief that period of life is over. Yeah. Or, you know, so I would just say embrace that. You know, people get really fearful of sad emotions, but emotions are really important. They tell us information, they're data points about what's important to us. They tell us about our values, and clearly the size of the grief tells you how important this really was for you, and how beautiful is that. But let it run its course, and start thinking about this new phase. And some people need life transition coaches or counselors because they can't even envision beyond that. But you can construct the next version of you and start thinking about how you're going to fulfill this void.
Right.
And they're not, parenting changes. You never stop being a parent, right? They need you in different ways. So you have to start thinking about what are new ways we'll connect? What are new traditions that we're going to have? Maybe it's not every day I see you, but maybe once every 2 months we spend a weekend together and you stop everything you're doing and I get 2 full days of your attention rather than the, hi, you're home, good, bye.
Right.
So it changes.
And it also might change, because you're right. People come home and they pass each other in the hall and people are busy and schedules and things are happening. And then once you're apart, you may have create that different relationship where you're actually talking and finding out about a day and finding out, what's going on for each other. The relationship changes.
Yeah, it does. It does. So I just don't want them to feel like it's that you're not going to feel some bond or, there's still ways to participate.
Right.
You still are significant to that child,
So I have to tell you, when our older daughter went away to university, they were excellent at the transition. When you drive in, it's, everything is, they've done it before, well-oiled machine.
Oh,
they
yeah.
pull her from the car because they don't want that sad goodbye. They pull her, everybody's talking to her. People are taking luggage out. By the time you get to her dorm room, it's already on her bed. Like, everything had worked out the way that it should. The one problem we had, this guy pulled her from the car. Hey, what's your name? Great to see you. So nice. Come on, welcome. And he turns around and the back of his shirt says, hello, my name is Midnight Snack. And I thought my husband, if he didn't pass out, I thought he was going to pull her back into the car and take her home.
Yeah, we don't think university is a good idea. There's men there.
That's right. That's right.
Perhaps sit on the porch with my broom and keep them away.
Perhaps we didn't think this through.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But his idea, the way that he was able to cope was more of the, maybe we shouldn't talk, maybe I shouldn't hear that you're coming home late at night because I'm just going to assume that you are already there, safe in your locked home. I don't have to worry about you.
Yeah.
So there's different ways to cope.
Well, and we saw, to your point, when kids went off to campuses and started to experience their young adult life and were the makers of their own mischief and meals, they did just fine. And then when they come home for summer jobs, waiting for the next school term to come or whatever, they come back as somebody who's been out and launched. And so now they're under your roof and you're saying, no, I want you home at midnight. And you're like, I've been going to parties till 3 o'clock in the morning for the whole year, and this was never a problem for you. Why do I suddenly have to live under your not bedtime curfew? Under your curfew? And so there we have to make a negotiation with our kids because, yes, they've been independent, but their behaviors didn't impact anybody else. So now that you are sharing a house, we have to find out what is the concern there. Is it because you think they're doing evil things,
carousing?
But a lot of times for parents, it's like, I need to know when the door is going to be locked, or I need to know I can't sleep. I sleep lighter until you're home. I actually just can't sleep. My little worrywart brain. In which case, then we got to kind of try to make some arrangements about how they quell their fear and how early they could come in, and so try to find a way that since we're all under this roof together, how best can we do some give and take on how things are going to go around here.
Have a couple of viewer questions
Sure.
for you regarding this. My daughter is moving to the States for university. I'm so proud of her, but she is my only child, and I divorced her father when she was 3, so it's just her and me for years. I'm not sure what I will do without her. A little bit about what we've been talking about, but the idea of that distance now adds an additional layer. So I wanted to ask you that question.
Yeah, and again, you hear about going to the big cities. If you're somebody who lived in a rural town, even people up north, when their kids move to Toronto, same thing. Or if they move provinces, we're in Ontario, but they send their kids off to Halifax or Simon Fraser in BC, and suddenly you got provinces. You can't jump in the car and be at their side and be a helper to them.
Right.
So it's a much bigger, it's a bigger ask of the parent in terms of saying, like, you really are letting out a lot of leash, right? And it can be scary for parents. But that is our cross to bear. That is, we can't make the solution, I need to tether you closer. Our kids need to ascend and fulfill and self-actualize and do all these wonderful growth things. And we're going to just have to bite the bullet and say, the world can be dangerous, but my kid has skills, and we can look at ways that they can get supports where they are. But it's just the nature of the beast.
Right.
The risk factors now for youth or whatever are far less than they have been historically. And yet we're more protective. We assume that kids can't manage more than we ever have in any other generation. That seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. So when you ask grandparents to tell you the stories of their childhood and what they did in their childhood, they're like, oh yeah, when I was 9, my parents put me on a train and sent me to my grandparents, 5 states away, and I just made my way,
Yeah.
Again, kids in rural environments are driving tractors and out on horses miles away from their parents, whereas we won't let our kid go to the corner store and buy a pack of gum. It's just very different what those experiences are. So, parents need to think about the fact that it's their uncomfortability is really not in keeping with how safe their child is and what they can control. So, if you have anxiety around that, again, not tooting the whole, we can help that in counseling.
Yeah.
We help everyone with their problems, but you can't keep your kid tethered.
No. So for parents who are about to have this, in the next, even their kids are in high school, how do you start to prepare? Because you're talking about kids are quite capable. We've already given them the skills.
Well, that's, again, really part of that is, have we? I mean,
We ask ourselves that.
I mean, what ends up happening is it's the year before they're going away to college, and you realize they don't know how to use the washing machine. They don't know how to they don't know how to fry an egg. It's like, yeah, we need to be doing that all along the life cycle. We want to be asking ourselves, what's the next thing my child can do? How do I ready them for the next thing, so that we're constantly, slowly handing over responsibility, training them for skills, teaching them how to manage money, teaching them how to roast a chicken, bit by bit by bit, because those are all things. And then by the time you see that, you're like, wow, I've got this kid who really knows how to manage life. They get themselves up. They do their own homework. I don't have to remind them. They pick up after themselves. They know how to cook a meal. Hopefully they've had that independence under your roof, so that you can prove to yourself that when they were in sticky situations, they managed to get themselves out of it, and so that now they're just this is the next step. They're going to do it in another town.
Starting to panic. Starting to panic over here on this side of the couch.
I actually quite enjoyed watching this in this phase of life. When I really knew they were making independent decisions, I really was sort of like, I wonder how they're going to be, how they're going to do. And they're really 100% fully out there. And I loved that my kids were working remotely, because I got to see my children interact professionally. I'm just like, you're like all that in a bag of chips. I'm not lying. Like,
Yeah.
employee of the month, says Mom.
Yeah.
It's great. They do grow up. It's amazing.
I know, it's amazing to hear, and our son has done, our oldest has done so well, and listening to him on a podcast, he was being interviewed, and you're listening going, is this him? Like, this is like worker, this is adult Jimmy,
Yeah.
not little Jimmy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing to see. Another question for you. My 22-year-old moved home after graduation and has started working from home. I'm worried he's so happy here he will never move out. Am I stunting his development by allowing him to live here? 22 right now seems very young.
Young. Yeah. So average age of people flowing and growing, as we're growing and fleeting, it is getting older for the reasons that I stated earlier. So when we say, is it thwarting his development? What I would say is, it depends. Meaning, if you are pampering him, if you're protecting him from the realities of being an adult, then yes, it's going to be hurtful for him.
Right.
So what would be important is that in the new arrangement of being an adult living at home, is he helping out with chores? Is he paying some room and board? It doesn't necessarily mean that, like, even if you've made an agreement that money is being put aside for a down payment on a house, I would still expect a contribution towards his portion of the food, something for the room rate in the city or whatever, so that there's a gesture that you are not fully carrying him. When you grow up and you have a paycheck, you need to pay for roof over your head and food on the table. That's a reality of life. So he's on the savings plan, but there's still money to be exchanged there. So the assumption, it's these little hidden assumptions that if mommy is suddenly doing my laundry and mommy is whatever, again, if mom's doing the laundry because it's easier strategically, but then he's washing the car and doing the grocery shopping, just so long as you're not sitting there in your prince throne, having your parents be in servitude to you, well, you get all the benefits. That's what we're trying to avoid. So yes, you have to remember, like, for many, many years, we lived in multi-generational homes. In many cultures around the world, we still live in many multi-generational homes. It's absolutely fine, so long as it's done, again, in a respectful way and no one's being overburdened and nobody is under-participating in functioning of the group.
Right. But it's very difficult for a lot of parents to not cater when kids come home because they're just excited about having them back.
Well, and it's like I said, a lot of it is self-serving. A lot of it is because I feel important when I am looking after you. And to your point, you still have that little Jimmy in your head and you kind of forget he's grown up, right? His voice is like this and he's got the man beard or whatever. And, and you're like, I don't know, in my mind, you're still 6 and I still want to, wipe your cheeks and spit and fix your hair, It's like, no, you have to. I think it's why I think it's easier when kids leave for some period of time and then come back, because then on that coming back, that's sort of when you recreate the agreement.
The transition.
Yeah. It's like, okay, we're meeting you in adult terms now. This is the newer agreement for living at home.
Perfect. Another question for you. Is it okay to refuse access to my car? My 25-year-old daughter keeps borrowing my car and saying it's just sitting in the driveway, you don't go anywhere. For me, it's about being able to do as I please and go where I want to without having to make considerations of others. Plus, there is wear and tear on the vehicle and possible accidents. I just want to say, go get your own car. Is that mean?
I feel this woman has already made up her mind and she's just really looking for validation that she's not going to be mean.
Right.
No,
Allison said
that's right.
Is not mean.
Yeah, I'm still a good mother and I can say no to the car. It's so funny. When I was growing up, I will answer her question, but just in terms of, again, like different families, different generations or whatever. When I was growing up, my dad was like, what is this thing that you're calling a family car? This is my car. Yes. There's no family car. Like, what is this? Can I have the family car? No, it's my car. It was very clear. Yeah. Possession is 9/10 of the law.
Shut this down right now.
Yeah. That was not, so, if we asked to borrow the car occasionally, I remember trying so hard to make dentist appointments during the school day so that I would say, like, well, if I take the bus, I'm going to miss half my classes. Like, if I take the car, I'm just, got it. Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
But no, so the point is, she can say, in this house, no, that is okay. And she's, oh, but my friend gets to have her parents' car all the time. It's like, if you've moved back home, you have to decide. It's a negotiation. Mm-hmm. So if she wants to say no, she has the right to say no, and she can say, I'm not comfortable sharing my car. No, that's not part of the agreement. Another family can say, yes, absolutely, so long as you replace the gas and you're respectful of when I need it. And that would be another agreement, and that's a fine agreement. But the point is, it has to be discussed and understood. It should not be an assumption that the car comes with coming home.
No, but that is a different dynamic that has changed over the last couple of years with people now working at home. So there may be a car that's sitting in the driveway where normally it's sitting at work in the parking lot and, out of sight, out of mind. Now it seems like it's available and it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and they don't know your day. I mean, right? I mean, my schedule changed all the time. I did finally, with my kids, I ended up getting a new car, and I said, you guys can have this hand-me-down car, which was sort of on its last legs. I said, but if you ever fight about it, ever, I'm going to go sell it because I won't bring conflict into the home. So when the two of them would be like, well, I want the car tonight. Well, I want the car tonight. I go, is everything all right? They're, yep, no, it's fine, Mom. Yep, good. They never did fight about that car because they knew that I would act on my word. Now, I didn't get there at 20 I got there because I said what I mean, and I mean what I say, and I always followed through. So I never threw an idle threat to my kids. So they know that if I'm putting that out, that is what I'm going to do. So training your kids to know that you are going to be consistent and follow through happens all through childhood, so that by the time they get to adulthood and you make those big proclamations, it was good. Worked out well.
Well, and that goes back to the idea of, making sure that these things are happening as they get older. So when you reach that day of moving out, it's not going to be as big of a blow for either side.
I had a lot of kids during the pandemic, and it wasn't the parents that were worried about the flown and grown. It was the kids saying, how can I possibly care for myself? I've never had this much independence. I can't make it out there. And it's like, that's a sign that we've been overparenting, because they're underfunctioning because we're overparenting. And so if they don't think they can handle it, that's really a problem.
Yeah. I think for a lot of parents too, because of the pandemic, and we did a show talking about back to school and closing the gap, and for a lot of parents, they don't feel that they were getting enough in the education system during the last few years of high school. And now, on top of them moving out, moving away, moving a distance, you're dealing with being behind. The good thing is everybody is behind and in that situation, but it's hard closing that gap from high school to post-secondary.
And also agreed. And I was thinking about the lovely experience that your daughter had of being so welcomed at the campus. A lot of these kids that went off to colleges were alone in their dorm rooms. There was parents not allowed in the facilities. They didn't have the social gatherings to make people feel at home. There's some real troopers. The kids showed a tremendous amount of resiliency, and I think as parents we need to remember kids can do hard things. They can. The harder the things that you do, the more you're proud of yourself for having actually endured it, and you're like, look at, if I can do that, what else can I do? So please don't feel badly when your kids struggle. I mean, you can be empathetic, but parents want to clean up life and make sure that they're always happy and always smiling, and they don't realize that there's some real important things to be learned by our kids being up against some struggles. It's okay to not like your teacher. It's okay that you got fired from a job. How are you going to bounce back from that? They have to experience the ups and downs of life. And that's so hard for parents because we don't like to see our kids struggle. We don't like to see them unhappy. We don't want to burden them. Oh, how are they going to get all their homework done and pack their lunch? I'll make their lunch. They'll learn time management. That's how, you know?
That is it. That reminds me of one of the chapters in your book. And when we first started doing the parenting show, you had just put out your book. And it was, and I'm going to get the chapter wrong, but the one that stood out for me was always self-care is...
not selfish.
Is not selfish. And it goes back to that. It's the idea of teaching them that, you're not doing everything for them, which would help the family dynamic, and certainly in this situation it's going to help because kids aren't relying on you to help them through it.
And kids that lean too hard on their parents, like those kids that haven't learned independence, they become the needy and demanding ones. And not only that, they'll use you as a scapegoat. They'll say you made me late for hockey. Why didn't you clean my shirt last night? You'll end up being the fall guy for everything. So much better to teach these little micro lessons so that by the time those kids are heading off to college or university or their first apartment away from home or whatever, they're really feeling quite competent and capable, and you've experienced and have some trust that they do know these life skills. And even then, if something goes wrong, it's part of life.
Yeah,
that's part of life.
You did mention recreating and creating new traditions. As we finish the show, what kind of, is that just about the holidays when they come home, or is that just recreating family movie night and the things that were a favorite for them to return to? Some familiarity.
It includes anything. For example, my daughter pretty much calls me anytime she's walking between two classes or walking the dog in the morning.
Yeah.
It would be weird if I didn't get a little check-in. The other thing we do, we Snapchat all the time. We constantly Snapchat.
Look at you, Snapchatting.
I know. And in fact, we Snapchat our meals often. I did teach my kids to cook. We're quite proud of our meals. So they're in a group chat with their dad, and they're, chatting all the time too. And for those low communicators, because I know there's some people that are like that too, there's other people that just do like games, like whatever. You can do online Scrabble or whatever. So there's still this feeling, and again, there's no right or wrong amount of time. It's whatever you set up for yourself. But I just want people to know that it's possible, that different arrangements and relationships can still be as strong or surprisingly bring other ways closer. To your point about sometimes having 2 solid days of someone's time and attention is actually, the conversation goes in a very different way than day in and day out living.
Right.
And maybe it's every summer we take a mother, daughter, father, son trip somewhere, and now we've added camping or Vegas to the mix. I don't know. Let's stick with camping.
Completely changed the tradition and the dynamic.
Well, they're adults now. You can do different things.
That's right. I talked about your books.
Yep.
Tell me more.
Tell me more. Well, I wrote these 3 books.
Yes.
The one you just talked about was Breaking the Good Mom Myth, and that was really the book that was written because so many times in my practice, I would have people saying, I'm doing this in order to be a good mother, and they sound like good ideas, but psychologically, those tenets are inaccurate. So it was the reframes and the readjustments that I had to regularly do. So I thought I'm just going to write a book about that. And then I wrote Honey, I Wrecked the Kids, which is all about positive discipline, ways to deal with misbehaviors without resorting to yelling, screaming, timeouts, all these other things that don't work.
Right.
And then Ain't Misbehaving is just a solution book. You can just look up your problem, refuses to study, won't go to bed, and then it'll say solutions on page 88. Yeah. So it's good for if you're busy.
You have a portal like that on your website where you can also do great search engine to find different topics.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been I've kept my blog articles. There's thousands of them now. So there's lots up there, as well as videos and links to all my social handles. I'm putting content out all the time. So right now I'm doing, whatever. I'll pick a theme of the month, and so you can follow me. And there, I like to just make quick little digestible tips to make life just a little bit easier.
Oh, that's what we need.
Yeah,
that is what we need.
Motivational quotes are in there.
Yeah.
And then I have my podcast, Parenting the Adlerian Way. So there's a link to Spotify and Apple, and you can listen to a few episodes, the latest ones, on my website as well. So check out AlysonSchaefer.com.
Amazing. Great way to end the show. Thank you so much to everyone for watching, and we will see you next time on The Parenting Show.